All right, namaste everybody. Welcome for joining us. Your host today, Jeffrey Armstrong, Kavindra Rishi, Veda Acharya, Sanskrit scholar, best-selling author, Vedic astrologer, and philosopher, is in conversation today with Satish Sharma. Satish is a Dharmic theologian, Hindu philosopher, yoga acharya, and project director of the British Board of Dharmic Scholars, of which Jeffrey is one of the scholars. I could go on for the whole hour just reading all the accolades for these two gentlemen, but I encourage you to go to their websites and push their press buttons to learn more about them. So
we must do that sometime, Sandy. I look forward to it.
Yes, we will. We must. So I'll turn it over to Jeffrey. I'll try and manage all the late people coming in, and you're going to hear pings. My apologies. All right.
Right. Thank you, Sandy. And pranams to. We're so fortunate to have him with us today, and he and I have been enjoying the pleasure of speaking together for quite a long time. The subject today, since both he and I are longtime yoga practitioners and teachers, we are going to try to frame what's going on in our world from the perspective of yoga, and by so doing, give you the tools that will empower you to stay steady in the midst of it the way yoga practitioners naturally will do. So with that, I'll ask Satish to also make a brief comment, and then we'll do the Guru Mantra, and then we'll begin officially, and he and I will take turns.
Jeffrey ji, pranam and namaskar to everybody else, and thank you all so much for taking the time to participate in something which we hope will be helpful and useful to everybody. Before jumping in, may I just offer a disclaimer and a reminder that there are many people in this group who have been blessed with the company and wisdom from Jeffrey ji, but the majority of people here are not known to me. And so I'm going to offer a disclaimer and just remind everybody that we're all consenting adults and that we're all here voluntarily. And if a subject is broached, remarks are made, or an observation is made with which you disagree, please remember that we are from the tradition of infidels. Since we do not believe, we don't require you to believe anything either. And you have the complete freedom to say, what a load of rubbish, we'll ignore that one. The conversation we're hoping is going to be free and wide-ranging. And so we don't really want it to be limited in any way, shape or form, just by having to be cautious about sensitivities of people who we don't know. So please bear with us. And having said that, I now have given myself carte blanche to say whatever I want and bear no responsibility whatsoever. So Jeffrey ji, thank you so much for the honor and the opportunity to play with many of your very close and devoted friends and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Satish. Actually, for everyone's, to give you a definition, the Sanskrit word sadhu is what we call one another. We all who are practitioners and admire one another's wisdom and depth and practice and company. So we'll say sometimes sadhu, sadhu, when somebody says something really wonderful. It's kind of like here, here, yes, that's great. So, in the context of that, sadhu means one who cuts through the ropes of ignorance that bind us with the axe of wisdom, Vedic wisdom. So in that cutting, as Satish was explaining, our attention is never to draw blood or cause harm. If we say something that's sharp-edged, it's like a scalpel. It's not a street fight with a knife trying to stab someone. So with respect to all the people we may slightly criticize for having a not quite as perfect as it should be viewpoint, we are not being despicable toward them. We adore them and want to empower them, and we respect them for often their sincerity, even if they don't necessarily have the wisdom to go with it. There's a difference between being sincere and being sincere with accurate knowledge. So we're going to try to help you see those distinctions, and the paradigm that we both represent is the much trampled and overlooked viewpoint of India, about which there is a massive amount of negative propaganda as a residue from British times of colonization, which isn't over, it's just now silenced and done in more subtle ways. And Satish, living right in the heart of the hornet's nest, is a marvelous circumstance. I made up a saying long before I knew him that when Ravana was dying in the Ramayana, Ram got close to him and Ravana whispered, "I'll be back and I'll get another island." So Satish, what's your website or what's your email?
Well, my email address, which I really only generally use and disclose for pundits and especially priests and those who are overly religious, is ravana@rakshas.com. It was the first domain name I purchased, and I use it with great relish on invitations when we're inviting people to a recital of the Ramayana or something like that. It draws a wonderful response. But please don't bombard me with messages to get rid of it. Purely mischief, that's all.
And the irony and a sense of humor is what is always necessary under any adversity. So if you feel that's present here also, it's never disrespectful, but always, because humor is our best friend when we're in distress.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It is.
So I'll just begin with what we all begin as Vedics with the Guru mantra. So Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshvara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. We Vedics always acknowledge that we're the recipient of great wisdom from previous teachers and gurus and acharyas and rishis. And we're just trying to serve them and everyone by passing that on. And then secondly, Ganesha represents the fact that we're a work in progress. We're trying to perfect ourselves. None of us are perfect. Only the Atma that shines within us is a perfect representation of our true immortal self. But right now, we're all a work in progress. So Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Om Gam Ganapataye Namaha. Ganesha is the remover of obstacles, and I'd like to say Vedic tech support. Satish, you want to add to that?
No, that's awesome. I remember the first time I encountered you at Imperial College in London, and you were standing there on the stage and surrounded by a bunch of Brits and some very fresh-faced new undergraduates at the college, and you stood in the middle of the stage and you launched into that Ganesh mantra and explained to them how you'd met Ganeshji at the museum in the form of a murti that morning, and how you were so delighted that it was standing at the entrance to the museum giving benedictions to everybody else. So I couldn't possibly ask for a more appropriate introduction. Om Gam Ganpate Namaha.
Om Gam Ganpate. So I'll just open with a statement that Satish can then embellish for a while for us. Because the philosophies of the Vedic culture have been so twisted by the colonization process, the first thing that no one really understands is that science as we know it came from India and had been active there for thousands and thousands of years before Western civilization even existed, under the name of Samkhya. Samkhya means the analytical study of all the categories of material existence. And this is the basic of Vedic civilization and has been from the start. This attempt to do two things: to know the categories of matter and the belief that they are all purposeful and that we can interact with them just as we interact with each other. Though they are laws of nature, there are beings that are animating those laws of nature, and those are called devas and devis. And then we are called manushya. We're the humans, and the laws of nature embodied are the purposeful rules of conduct of living here. And a yogi is someone who is bridging those two realms, wanting to obey the laws of nature, promote the well-being of all life, know the devas firsthand personally, and also work with the humans, live with them as harmoniously as possible, not try to force them to a viewpoint, but try to lead them lovingly and gently toward a mutual cooperation that benefits all of us. And because this is missing in the civilizations we're living in, because it's toxically missing in many cases, the paradigms of medicine, the paradigms of politic, the paradigms socially, the way we treat animals, the way we're treating the planet, are all distorted from the Vedic perspective. And so as I hand this over to Satish now, he, I, and all yogic practitioners who are sincere and genuine would be nodding yes to what I just said, and they would then have their own unique contribution to how to be more effective in doing so. So with that, Satish Ji, please enlighten us.
If I may, I'm just going to start with a tiny little mantra, which I think is a wonderful mantra with which to create a container for us to engage in. And many of you, I'm sure, will have come across the Sehna Vabhutu mantra. I will translate it at the end, but if you'll just join me for a moment, it's the mantra whereby people who are sharing knowledge create the relationship between themselves so that they can share that knowledge with an air and a feeling of bhavna, of affection and trust. So the mantra is Om Sehna Vavatu Sehno Bhunaktu Sehaviryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Om.
Shanti.
And so the mantra is suggesting 2 or 3 thoughts. The first is the thought that we're engaging in this journey together. May we share wisdom and learning. May there never be harsh words between us. May we take what we learn back to the communities that we work in and bring illumination to them. May our efforts also be rewarded with success and light. So having said that, now we can jump in. So Jeffrey G just used a word there, Purush, which is what we use to identify the individual, the being. And the Purush has certain goals, purposes, experience sets, if I could use that word, and we call those Purush Arth, the purposes for which a Purush comes into being. I think it's probably a great place to start. If you can all cast your mind and memory back, each and every one of us at some time in the dim and distant past opened our eyes and found ourselves here. We opened our eyes and found ourselves in a place which was quite incredible. If you have encountered or spent time with very young infants, there is a stage when they start to gaze at everything around them and start to take it in. And that awesomeness, that amazing discovery of this place that we were in, it becomes added to when we discover that the experiences we can have here are incredibly fulfilling. We experience senses, we experience experiences, and we also experience the capacity to actually love being here and be in love with each other whilst we're here. Now, the 4 Purusharth, they are intended as a set of understandings to enable us to fully experience the experience of being here, but in a manner which doesn't destroy the environment and the bodies which are so critical to us to feel and understand and experience those things. Now, an individual we teach, when an individual has an awareness and is steeped in the first 2 of those Purusharth, that individual has an extremely experience-rich passage, but ultimately ends in an immense amount of suffering. And the first 2 are Kam, which is passion, and Arth, which is material abundance. Now, if you're in a society which only recognizes those 2, the pursuit, the passionate pursuit of material abundance leads to excessive consumption. And what we are perhaps witnessing is the result of power residing with people who have only those 2 as their principal purposes. the senses that we have. I always teach that we have 6 senses because we are sitting in awareness, and we have the 5 physical inputs, but we also have the mind as an input into awareness. And at this moment in time, those 6 senses are being so stimulated, continuously stimulated, that we've even created a culture which is happy to consume bodies and the environment in order to maintain that stimulation of all 6 senses. Now, the third vital bit of an understanding is this amazing word called dharma, which Jeffrey G and I talk about so often, and we try and sculpt an understanding using the language of the English medium, which can convey the full experience of understanding what dharma is. So I'm going to try and add a little bit to it. If I were to be challenged to put it into one word, I would say dharma is closest to harmony, in the same way that an orchestra functions with harmony. Lots of individual roles, lots of purusha, lots of individual entities, each playing their own part of that orchestra's melody, each one of them fulfilling their role to perfection, but yet contributing to something which is bigger than the sum of all of the parts. So dharma is that harmony, but it's that harmony in this material space that we exist in. So that sense of dharma is vital to understand. Once you've experienced calm and arth, passions and abundance, you need to be able to continue to experience those, but in a manner which is harmonious. Imagine if somebody with a French horn decided that the sound of them playing the French horn was just too good, and they were totally happy to continuously play their own rhythm in that orchestra. Everybody else would find it a little bit upsetting. Just one French horn playing in the middle of an incredible performance at the Royal Philharmonic would be almost a painful experience. And yet, when you have somebody or a society or a community or any grouping which is focused on their own experience and their own enjoyment of passion and sensory perception, we then get disharmony. Now, we would call that adharma. So anything which is anti-dharma is actually adharma. Now, what I'm going to gently mention is that using that lens, i.e., is something contributing to harmony and the well-being of the whole of the construct that we find ourselves in. We understand ideologies from a different point of view. Capitalism sometimes is adharmic and sometimes it's dharmic. We have religions, as they're called, which I think, Jeffrey G, we would probably call them sampradayas, in that they are tiny little parallel silo understandings. We would call them sampradayas, I think that's the nearest word.
Groups of people passing something forward through history.
Yeah, and so religions can also be adharmic in that they don't contribute to the harmony. Any ideology, any set of ideas, we judge through the lens of, is it contributing to harmony? Is it going to increase the passion, the experience of passion for everybody? Is it going to increase the capacity to enjoy all of the senses, but in a manner which does no detriment to any other soul? So the second of those is, the third of those 4 things that a Purush has to master is dharma. And dharma, once you become steeped into it, you can then turn back and look on your understanding of calm and arth and start to use those fully in the service of dharma. And that bridge, that step from just the first 2 to incorporating the third is really where the dominant civilizational ideology at this moment in time is standing. In the same way that many times an individual will not make the leap from calm and arth into dharma until their body is so, shall we say, the body is giving them so much feedback that, guys, I'm really not happy with what you're doing to me. It's that crisis point that we often reach as individuals, that state which we call vishad, the state of deep and dark despair. That's normally the catalyst the point at which we say, okay, enough Kam, enough Arth, this is not working for me, there is something else. And that's the moment at which, if a person encounters the understandings which can lead you to be harmonious, all of a sudden, your use of Kam and Arth becomes actually even more fulfilling and even more satisfying than it was when they were the only two items that you were prepared to work with. The fourth one, the final one, which only exists in the Indic philosophies, is this whole notion of moksha. You see, one of the discoveries that happens when you're passing through the stage of dharma is that at the center of your being, there is the capacity to experience delight and joy, which far outstrips everything that the other two stages can pour into your awareness. That Kam, i.e. passion, Arth, material sensations and wealth and abundance. And so a time comes when you have to make a choice between looking backwards and getting sensory satisfaction and stimulation from Kam and Arth, or trying to just place yourself in that continuous state of being an incredibly fulfilling rapture. And in order to do that, you have to discard your attachments to whatever else existed in the space of Kam and Arth. And we call that moksha. And moksha is not liberation in the religious sense. It's very simply, more as a word means desire-based attachment. Ksha as the suffix means the diminution of. So if you stick ksha on the end of something, it means reducing, getting less and less. So moksha is the process whereby you actually steadily diminish your attachments to anything which is desire-based. And when you've completed that process, the first three stages have no bearing on your sense of fulfillment anymore. You are then in that stage where you are connected purely and solely with the essence, which is at the heart of your being, and suddenly you find that everything else is included within the heart of that being. So that is a quick sort of walkthrough, bearing in mind that I don't want to be talking for the whole hour, but that's a quick walkthrough of the journey of a sadhu. Jeffrey G, you mentioned sadhu. If I can toss a couple more bits of linguistics and vocabulary in, the word sad actually is to experiment. And sadhu is one who is performing an experiment on the very act of existence. And sadhana are the experiments that we perform using this body as our laboratory and the senses as our instruments of measurement. So that's what sadhu, sadhana, and sad actually means as well. So that's...
From that we get scientist, but science is rooted in the word scientia, which means to cut.
Okay.
So modern science decided to cut everything open to see how it worked. Vedic science decided to meditate and get to the essence of everything and cooperate with it.
Perfect. Jeffrey G, it's like I see Janus, the two heads of Janus. You can look in two directions. One thing that my ancestors discovered a long, long time ago is that we're here, it's amazing, but if you sit still and pour all of your attention internally, you discover something even more amazing. Nice and simple. All we have to do is to sit still long enough. And that means perfecting sitting, perfecting stilling, and then just allowing things to unfold. This machinery that we call a body is constructed for that experience. And yet somewhere along the line, we lost our attention. Rather than it going inwards, we poured it outwards. And once we poured it outwards, some of us got lost out there and have really been enslaving everybody else just to give them a continuous drip feed of sensory stimulation. And that's probably a short way of summarizing the whole of the last 2,000 years. Now we desperately need to make the next step happen. And the next step is for everybody to realize that we have to move back into harmony. At the beginning of our session, I bounced an idea off Jeffrey G, which I won't go into too much detail on, but the whole of the earth is now moving into a stage where we're being reminded that we have needs, and we have wants, and we have desires. And really, the latter, the last two, are not critical for our existence. All of a sudden, people are deciding, actually, we want bread, and for some reason, we want toilet roll. I'm not quite sure why that's happening, but for some reason, people are going to the shops and taking bread and toilet rolls. So very strange.
I
If
have
I
an
can,
answer for that came to me this morning, Satish ji.
yep. Well,
And
if
that
I
is,
can,
they're eating the wrong things because the companies have been allowed to sell something that is not food to us and call it food.
correct.
So this then is poisonous to their system, but no one can say that because they would be insulting the companies that are making all the money, and they have the money to stop
Absolutely.
from saying that. So our medical system supports that and calls that food. And then, here's the joke, that food passes through our body causing all kinds of damage, that so-called food. And when it starts to come out the other end, that's the evidence of our mistake. And so as people ran into the stores, they bought two things, junk food, their favorite junk food addiction, and toilet paper to get rid of the evidence of their dysfunction.
I can add a little bit to that. In a satirist here in the UK, he said the government in Britain has been advising people to sneeze into their elbow, like so, and what everybody has done is gone out and bought toilet rolls, which is an indication that the British public don't know their arse from their elbow, which we all thought was quite funny.
What to speak of what they're full of. But I wanted to add that to your description, which was so illuminating for everyone. That is a very important Sanskrit word, which is gu. What we're surrounded by in Sanskrit is called the gu. And it is an inert, unconscious substance, which has to go through multiple processes of transformation to become a reasonable carrier of useful experience. And when you get a hold of that to extract the sweetness, the rest of the goo is still stuck to you. My metaphor for this is, if you remember, the child's tale was Brer Rabbit. He got thrown in the tar and became a tar baby, but then anyone who grabbed him got stuck in it also. So we are stuck in the goo, and the word ru means to remove.
Precisely.
And so guru is your goo remover.
Absolutely. And the earth is teaching us now that we have things that we don't need and that they need to be removed. And in its Kali Roop, it's acting very, very maternalistically, shall we say. It's saying, right, you've been naughty kids. I'm not putting up with your nonsense anymore. Here is a correction. And our bodies are needing to adjust back to what's happening. There's a whole session that we can do just on the impact of Kali and how the current scenario we're in maps so perfectly to the portrait of Kali. But I just wanted to keep it.
Sorry, for my students, this is not Kali Yuga. He's talking about Mother Nature when she's giving us a spanking and telling us we're messing up. Her name is Kali.
Indeed.
Now go ahead.
Indeed. And so just on that subject of desires, wants and gurus, my Guruji said to me once, he said, Satish, if you're going to take the path of sadhana, there is so much that we have to get rid of. Mm-hmm. You have to bear in mind that the state you're wanting to attain is one where, he said, a river will never deny you its water, the sun will never deny you its light and energy, trees will never deny you their shade. And if you can be happy with those three, then you will have attained some degree of understanding of what it is that's valuable and is necessary. And that is what we are being taught. That is what we're being taught.
I need to find a guru that's got chocolate on that list.
Oh, I'm sure you can find one. I'm sure you can find one.
Well, there's a particular chocolate that opens your chakras. That's why they call it chocolate.
Well, it's funny you say that. My son had a dessert the other day, and it was a chocolate Ganesh or something, and it's manufactured by a company who are called Goo.
That's good. It removes your compulsions. It's chocolate Ganesh and reminds you not to eat too much all at the same time.
It does. It does.
Well,
if I can just conclude and hand back to the group,
yes.
there is an attitude that we need to remember. In days gone past, it was conventional for a Brahmin to start his day as he sat up on his bed. He would put his feet onto the floor, and before placing them on the floor, he would ask for forgiveness from the earth for the very simple task of having to place his feet upon her whilst he performed his duties. Now, that degree of reverence, when it becomes imbibed by a culture and a society, we then learn the capacity for a civilization to last for tens of thousands of years. And the Indic, the Hindu, as a geographical and civilizational label, that civilization we know has been in excess of 17,000 years without consuming the earth. And that's only possible when we acquire this, the appropriate level of reverence for this amazing creature which we are blessed to be scurrying around on the surface of. Yeah. And so on that note, I will hand back to Jeffrey G. And Sandy, over to you. You're the ringmaster for this little circus that we're holding today.
Yes, thank you. That's amazing. And I was only half kidding about the chocolate. If there's not chocolate in the transcendental, I don't know.
So we have a term for it. We say there's moksha, but then there's also mocha.
Oh God, another few lifetimes for me. I'm sorry. All right. So Jeffrey, Satish told a story about the walking on Mother Earth, but tell us the story about what you did when you were in the ashram, when you were in bed every night. This is an amazing. He heard that same story from his guru, and his answer to that was, "Can you charge your legs in bed?"
Oh yeah. Well, so let me just add one little linguistic piece. So this being that Satish has now made more personal for us, which we do know to call Mother Earth, but we're imitating the Sanskrit. The name in Sanskrit is Mata, or mother, and Bhumi, B-H-U-M-I. The word Bhu in Sanskrit is to be. So to put it in Detroit street talk, it's where we be. It's Bhumi is where we all are booing. We're being. Be comes from the Sanskrit bhu. But Bhumi gave us the word humus, the earth itself, and from that comes the word human. So we are Bhumins, we are Bhumi beings. We are beings living on the body of Mother Earth, Mata Bhumi. And the very important thing to ask then is there are two kinds of living entities that live within matter because it's a dark substance that has to decompose. So the question then is, if we're living on and in Mata Bhumi, are we a parasite or a symbiote? And this is the question he just brought to our attention. Do you know how to craft a lifestyle, fulfilling yourself while being here to a reasonable amount, but giving back enough that you're in a symbiosis with life rather than a parasitical relationship sucking the life out of everything? And we live right now inside of a desperately, dangerously parasitic civilization. And the news at 5 is the news directed to continue the process of being the most successful parasite on the planet. And that's when you hear someone say, God bless our country because we're the best parasite out there. And ironically, you get teams of parasites working together. They recognize their goals are the same. But the symbiosis of life, that delicate web, is what we are watching be endangered right now. So I want to add to that, in sequence of what we're experiencing, that we're all thinking right now, this so-called flu was probably manufactured by humans in a laboratory. We're all thinking that and can't prove it for sure because we don't have the power to do so. And we're thinking that it was either accidentally leaked out by human error or that it was purposely leaked out to create an emergency, because during emergencies, those who want to could take control over those who already don't have power. And the symbol of that is that the only solution to what's going on right now is a needle full of what could be more toxins and what could become mandatory for every person as an act of fait accompli in totally getting inside of everyone and making that now mandatory. And that is a form of quasi-pseudo-medical totalitarianism and despotism that is exactly the opposite of having a cure and a solution that restores health. It is to create now a permanent state of emergency in which anything can be demanded of the citizenry because they're citizenry. And it can be shoved in them, poked at them, shoved up them, put upon them, and they have no recourse. So this is an important song that's playing in the background while we now discuss in gentlemanly terms what it is to become, and I'm going to say this so you hear it clearly, totally autonomous without misusing that autonomy. When Satish said, someone playing the French horn in an orchestra, making it difficult for everyone else to play, I immediately thought, yeah, Napoleon Bonaparte, a French horn. Blowing too loud and making a mess of civilization, and 4'6" and a total despot, and the personification of unbalanced calm and art with no dharma or moksha anywhere in sight. But he's just one of a rogues galleries of such beings, but we call those in the culture of yoga ravanas. They're ravenous. And this English word ravenous is from the Sanskrit word Ravana. The way Ravana created soldiers in his army is he taught them to rape, to pillage, and he actually made them carnivores eating humans. He made them cannibals. That's the one missing piece that modern despots have missed, that the ancient Asuras really understood this. Ravana knew this well. Once you are dehumanized to a certain point, you'll never behave as a human again that lifetime. You're done. So it's very crucial at the heart of this conversation to go from the marvelous, the best I've ever heard actually, description of these four human achievements, artha, kama, dharma, moksha. The question that Satish drew us toward is, ultimate freedom is our essential nature. So finally, that's the one that gives us the most satisfaction. The satisfaction we're looking for is not there in getting stuck to another lump of goo. It'll still only give you a little sugar and then turn to toxins. The ultimate state of well-being is when you're self-satisfied, otherwise known as Atma Rama. When your own self, which is immortal, is connected to that which is immortal in everything. That's the yoga. And then the satisfaction from that is Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. It's the immortal nectar that saves you from death, otherwise known as Amritam. Mrityu is death. What we really all fear is that death gets in the way of everything we're trying to do. But so does disease, and so does old age, and so even does birth. Or as the yogis put it, yes, birth, 20 years of wasted time. death. Yes, old age, 20 more years of wasted time and you're back in diapers. In between disease, birth, death, old age, and disease, old age. Raise your hand if old age is fun. So why is it that we don't want those four things, birth, death, old age, disease? And the simple answer from the yogis is because, my darling, you're immortal. Because you're part of immortality and you're visiting here on a visitor's visa. So moksha is something you grant to others once you've achieved it. And that is, you are very careful to harmonize with them, as Satish pointed out. Some years back, I'm a poet. I did a concert with a friend of mine who's a musician and invented the word Dharmonize. So words spoken that are Dharmic mixed with music that is not just the French horn playing, but where all the notes are cooperating is Dharmony. Now I'll answer Sandy's question. Her question was, when I was 5 years in the ashram, what did I do every night before I went to bed? And the answer is, I tied a rope around my ankles and tied my feet together while I slept. So that if during the night I changed my mind and suddenly tried to run away from yoga, I would fall down, reminding myself that that's my true nature right now. I'm fallen into the goo and I'm practicing yoga to get self-sufficient enough to extract myself from the goo by the association of that which is beyond the goo, to make that link back to the divines and to the devas of nature, and to become a fully cooperative, non-destructive, non-harming, symbiotic participant in the world, not just my culture. I may have to oppose my culture to be a symbiotic if I'm in a culture of parasites. I may have to respectfully say what Satish and I do all the time. I may have to take my sword out and cut a little bit and say, that's going to destroy the world. That's insane. That sadhu with the axe is not trying to cut the person. They're trying to cut the bonds that are going to harm the persons. So, Satish,
may I share a story that you've just reminded me of?
please do.
Bearing in mind that at the
Hold
end
on.
of the session, I'm hoping everybody is going to have some tools and some ideas they can start to implement.
Just 1 second, Sandy's got a word.
I
Please.
just wanted, sorry, Satish, I just wanted to point out to those of you that aren't watching your chat view, I'd like to thank Zubin and Andrea. They have been putting the Sanskrit words in as the speakers are speaking. It's such a great learning as we go along. So don't miss out if you think you're not getting these Sanskrit words. They're being put into the chat along with the meaning. Thanks. Sorry, Satish.
And before Satish continues, I just want to say one thing, Satish Ji.
Yeah.
I think this is almost at the magnitude of a historic event. The way that you and I, who just madly love each other for who we are and for the fact that we recognize each other as sadhus at the very core of the yogic tradition of Bharat. That the fact that one born outside the culture, one born inside the culture are coming together on the same platform of truth-telling with the exact same intention from those two perspectives that at just 100 years ago couldn't have a reasonable conversation with one another. This is a historic event I am so honored to be a part of.
It is, and it's an absolute pleasure to be able to share some ideas in the language which is so dominant at this moment in time. And your work, I've been following it for such a long time, and it has not just the intellectual side, but I've always found that it touches the bhavana, the sentiment as well, and that is often lost in translation. I've read so many copies and translations of the Bhagavad Gita, which are desiccated and they're missing some substance. So for those of you who have the good fortune to be connected with Jeffrey G, please make the most of him as a resource. He is absolutely a sage of our times. But turning to my story now.
Yes. stories.
Yeah, stories are the best.
It's possible to become a little bit despondent about the manner in which things are progressing and the tide that seems to be rising. But there is a smarter intelligence than all of humanity combined in the background. And it's evident from time to time. But I'm going to share with you a couple of thoughts as to what to do. Now, we have one teaching, which is the story is set in a forest, and there is a woodcutter chipping away at some logs, and he hears a rustle behind him, and into the clearing, three sages walk into the opening. And he looks across at them and thinks, my goodness, my fortune is just amazing, not just one sage, but three sages. So he stops them, touches their feet and says, please, can you spend a moment with me and share with me the fruits of your sadhana? What is it that you have acquired and attained with all these years of ascetic austerities? And the first one says, I have mastered the ability. With a single bone, I can recreate a whole skeleton. And the second one says, my goodness, well, with a dead skeleton, with a mantra, I can recreate a whole body. And the third one says, well, with a mantra, what I can do is breathe life into a dead body. And the woodcutter says, no, this is impossible. I have to see this. And he rummages around in the undergrowth and pulls up a little bone and gives it to the first gentleman, who says his mantra, and all of a sudden, there is a fully formed skeleton. The second says his mantra, and all of a sudden, there is the body of a dead tiger. And just before the third is about to speak, the woodcutter decides, hold on a minute, and he climbs up to into a tree and looks down. And the third one says his mantra, the tiger comes to life and eats all three sages. Now, although this is an ancient tale, its pertinence and relevance is to the use of technology.
Right.
Because technology is that tiger. And if you only know Kam and Artha, the first two, you will create technology to increase your experience of passion and to increase your capacity to dominate material abundance. What Dharma teaches you, which the woodcutter had in abundance, is when not to do something.
Yes.
Now, this is something that is desperately needed. Do you remember I said that this whole material world that we live in is created for us to just sit, enjoy the fruits of the Garden of Eden, but then to sit and turn our attention inwards and rediscover what it is that is the essence of our being. It doesn't take much doing to do that. It takes an awful lot of not doing to do that. And so we're in a time where the society that we're in, harnessed by technology, is serving the first two, and more of us need to stop doing adharmic things.
That's a great story, Satish. And just as you said, the lion or the tiger, I thought to myself, yes, and the hyena that follows around for the scraps is real estate.
Absolutely right.
Which is destroying our planet.
The stuff that we are doing, we need to stop doing. And not only do we need to stop doing it, we need to share the understanding with everybody else that the the European culture is all about doing. And we have to do less of that. And what this current scenario is requiring us to do is to do a lot less of that. And the reason that's happening is because the planet is also intelligent and aware that, okay, I need to intervene. So the first thing we need to do is to stop doing things which cause harm to other life forms. Something everybody should be shouting out from the treetops is stop eating meat.
Yeah.
Now,
Hey.
this is no longer a question of personal taste and personal preferences and the freedom to consume, etc. That's all an illusion. And so we have to stop eating it. And if there's anybody who needs a little bit more encouragement, on Netflix, there's a movie called The Game Changers. Please watch it, and you will understand what happens to this physical form when it's deprived of a meat-based consumption. Now, the other thing about not doing is that the things that we shouldn't do, they diminish our immune system and make us vulnerable to the much larger construction that this Earth planet is to actually get rid of us. Our immune system, we compromise ourselves. And when we do that, the nature in which we exist becomes overbearing and too powerful for us. So the other thing that we have to do is to stop disturbing everything which diminishes our immune system. And I think I've mentioned it before, going to sleep as the sun goes down, absolutely critical. The earth nourishes the bodies when they're asleep. Not eating meat, absolutely critical. Encouraging everybody else to abandon. McDonald's is a plague on the planet. It's an unbelievably harmful cancer on the very life essence of this planet. Stopping doing things is a dramatically powerful thing that we can do. And in terms of becoming a little bit desperate and a little bit worried about what goes on, I would share with you that the forces which are always pursuing Arth and Kam are actually a bit more dynamic than us guys who prefer to sit doing nothing and enjoy the river rushing by at our feet and so on and so forth. But what always happens is that these chaps who are very, very busy, they create something, and then the good guys always wake up and use it. And the internet, I'm sure most of you know, was created by the American military for the purposes of supporting military operations and providing much higher levels of stability between military installations, the communications. It was there to protect them. And what happens these days, we have people putting YouTubes of the Gayatri Mantra through the internet and sharing them everywhere. So whatever they create, we have to harness it, and we use it to serve. And in fact, therein lies the greatest encouragement. Within the systems that have been created, there are systems which we can use to heal and reverse the harm that's done. And what we're doing right now is really using the technology which was for domination, but we're using it against those who would seek to dominate. And Jeffrey, I know that you're a master of Aikido, and the smaller force being used very cleverly to pivot and destabilize a much stronger force. This is what we have to do. It is a time for us to understand what our role is.
And I made a name for this, Satish ji.
Ji.
And you are demonstrating it so aptly right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to observe a Tung Fu master. And what I have also labeled a Kshatriya.
Very good indeed.
The word Kshatriya is the name for the true, noble, honorable warriors of the Vedic culture, whose job was to protect and, if necessary, to hurt. Protect the innocent and hurt the asuras, the despicable parasites, if necessary, but carefully, surgically. But in the time we live, that is very difficult for us to exercise any terrestrial force of any kind. So we are now designated to use speech. So ladies and gentlemen, what we are demonstrating to you today is how to speak the truth, how to do sat or sadhu sangha, so that when you end up in an assembly of other human beings or one-on-one with them, you'll know how to essentially remove their darkness surgically at their request without causing them any harm. And the courage that this requires is what all of you are being invited to participate in. If you just learn what we just said in this hour, live it, practice it for a couple of years, the rest of your life will be completely different, because in every situation where a truth teller is required, you will stand up and go, "Oh, now I tell you the truth." And that power can be passed to any reasonable human being, and they cannot use it, like the Kshatriya, to harm or damage the innocent. They can only use it to talk down the dangers and destructions that are taking place all around us. I personally believe this is why the computer has been invented. But if it's not populated by these kind of conversations, as Satish said, it will just be to advertise McDonald's.
And at that moment, I think I should give my voice a rest and your ears a rest. And back to you, Sandy.
Well, we're at the hour point here. How is everybody doing? Shall we continue? Kind of nod your head. Yes. All right. If you must go, we will thank you very much for being online. I'd like to take some questions. Please text them into the type, and we will take them as Jeffrey sees them. Otherwise, Jeffrey, do you want to have a few final words before we
do? Thank you, Sandy. I just want to add one thing, that if you've noticed, Satish and I have both used vocabulary that doesn't exist within our civilization. I cannot overemphasize this, that unless you get a new vocabulary, you cannot represent these ancient ideas and sustainable ideas. The reason they're not happening is there's no way to talk about them. And they do not exist in the English language. They do not exist in the English language. They exist as Sanskrit terminology. So very simply put, if you're going to reprogram the world, you need about 300 Sanskrit words that you understand firsthand by practice and know how to use when speaking, so you can change not just your political party, but the entire nature of the conversation. You have to be able to be a game changer. And if you use the same words that got us into this problem, you cannot get us out. I'm telling you, you cannot lead us out, because you may know, but you do not have the words to give to others so they can speak and then behave differently. And so this exchange between he and I was conducted in the context of the Sanskrit language. Now, two parts to that. One is it talks about realities that are not been spoken of in Western civilization, period. Moksha, all these terms, dharma, moksha. There are some English words that come close, but none that are equivalents. And the second part is that conversation is the way we talk about the possibilities of a harmonized, dharmonized life. But the other use of Sanskrit, and this is so crucial, is that if you're going to if there's one thing that both Satish and I want you to do as a result of this meeting, for your benefit and the benefit of all, is find mantras and bring them into your life and do them all the time. Because the secret of the Vedas is twofold. That divine truth has been passed down through the Sanskrit language, and that the Sanskrit language in the right combinations is a direct access point to all of the energies that empower us to become embodiments of Dharma, of truth, of harmony, of Dharmony, of Dharmocracy. We're on the verge of creating a new culture. But if you don't practice every day what you don't do, by knowing it, it doesn't help you. If you don't practice 2 hours every day, you're just kidding yourself. Because, and that I mean chanting mantras 2 hours every day somehow, the whole time you're awake. If you're not doing that, you're not serious. Because the rest of life is eating you alive and stealing all your time, and you haven't figured out yet how to take your time back and point it at the ultimate empowerment.
I guess if you have time for Facebook, you have time to chant.
Whatever you have time for.
If I could just re-emphasize the importance of that. I started my journey in this country as far as being conscious is concerned, although I was born in India. But there was a time when I was fascinated and concerned about the process of death and dying. Mm-hmm. And so I did nothing other than chant the Mahamrityunjay mantra every day with a sense of devotion. I had it running on a little MP3 player, and it was plugged into my ear. And even when I was on site doing data security work and so on, I was hearing it. And after about 13, 14 months, I looked back, and that fear and that uncertainty about death had disappeared. And when I look back in that time, in fact, a lot of little bits of knowledge had come to me. People had given me books. I'd stumbled into readings and teachings and things like this. And all of a sudden, the manner in which Atma and physical form separate was something I was deeply, deeply familiar with. Now, using my intellect, I could not have mapped the journey that I went through in that time. And yet the mantra is known as being one which transcends, allows a person to transcend any hurdles presented by the stage that we call death.
Absolutely.
And so doing a mantra is really, really important, even though you don't know it. It's one of those things which has its own life and its own built-in sat nav. It'll take you to where you need, to what you need in order to understand the essence of that mantra. Give it a go. It's experiential. Be a sadhu, do a sadhana.
And that, what he just said, if you just imbibe that and think, how much of the goo that is in my life can I keep forever? Just do an assessment right now. That's every molecule of your body. That's everything that you call your possessions. Earlier, when Satish said that the sadhu becomes unencumbered by that, that's called nirvana. Nirvana is not disappearing into emptiness. Van means one who possesses, and nir means nothing. So the mantra is to give us something to hold on to while we divest ourself, listen carefully, divest ourself, the Atma, of all the goo that is stuck to it, and of the conceptions that we will not be our true self if we lose that goo. We're visiting this realm, is the premise of the yoga culture. Let go of everything that you're stuck on, stuck to, wounded by, hurt by, still thinking about, still carrying around. And I'm just going to give a metaphor that I invented for this. Imagine a friend of yours that you knew in high school bumps into you, first time you've seen him in 25 years, invites you to their house. They now have 3 children, halfway grown up, and they're taking you on a tour of their lovely suburban home. They go down into the basement and there's this terrible smell that assails your nose. And you go, whoa, what's that? They said, oh, that's the diaper room. And you say, excuse me? You know, the diaper room. And you say, what's that? Well, when we got married and had children, we had no idea of what, we'd never had children. And we thought maybe there's something important in keeping those diapers. So we have kept all of the poopy diapers of all of our children growing up, our 3 children, and they're in this room. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the psychologists of the world are making a living on. The poopy diapers in your spare room in the basement. And
so
this,
isn't this remarkable, Jeffrey G? I've actually shared the same understanding, but the analogy I used was that we're walking around with a basket on our heads, and each time we throw our socks into there, we're walking around with these smelly socks, and nobody wants to put them down. And yet, if anybody doubts that we're both being sort of lectured to by the same essence, there's an example.
absolutely.
Mine's on the head and Jeffrey's is in the basement.
So ladies and gentlemen, throw down the basket and flush the toilet.
Absolutely. Jeffrey G, somebody has just asked, I noted, about those 300 odd words. Now, I recall once upon a time, I think you mentioned that you were compiling an arsenal of the most potent, most pertinent vocabulary set that one would need in order to navigate this space. So it might be an opportunity for you to mention where you've gotten to on that. So I'm not chasing you up. I know you've got lots of books that you're working on, but it might be an opportunity to mention that.
Satish, once you finish your comments on the Bhagavad Gita, we'll release the 108 Sanskrit words to you.
Oh, touche, touche.
Years ago, I'll say this quite briefly.
Walked into that one straight into it.
It's hard to get one up on you guys, but you know, every now and then.
At the beginning of my career as a yogi, when I entered the ashram, the first job I was given was to correct my guru's English in the books that he was trying to bring into English. But at that time, I didn't quite understand the dilemma, so I just made it into reasonable street English so it would be understood. It took many years, until about 10 years ago, that I realized the intrinsic problem of importing language into another culture is that that culture is resistant to it. Our culture, based upon Christianity, and again, with no disrespect intended, has been one of the most violent cultures the world has ever seen in the name of sacred truths that they held very dear. And because of this, language is actually so important that in the time of Henry VIII in England, that's 1525, when he was alive, and when the Catholic Church removed himself from England because he wanted a divorce the Pope wouldn't give him, and Luther was making the Protestant Reformation in Germany. In England of that day, if you opposed the Catholic Church in any way, you would be burned at the stake. The people who tried to translate the Bible from Latin to English were pursued, burned at the stake, tortured, terrorized. Just think of this for a moment. This tells you how important language is, but no one will tell you that because they don't want the sheep to know the secret. They don't want you to know the secret of your bondage is you don't have a vocabulary of freedom.
Oh, that's a good quote. Write that one down, somebody.
And you do not have access to the knowledge that would make you autonomous. At the bottom of all of this discussion is, when you leave your body, if you're still gripping a hold of matter, you're simply put in a queue of people that still want to come back and do it again and again and again and again and again. That's called samsara. It means swimming together through the ocean of matter. Samsara. Together, Sara, swimming in the water of matter. If you want to do that, stay on track, don't change anything, be stuck, because you'll stay here for sure. If you don't want that to be the case, then take steps each day to stand back from matter as you and lovingly, gently, carefully assert yourself as an immortal being here on a visitor's visa. And that is a yogi. The yogi is ready at any moment. Destiny says you're done. And you've got, it's like NASA, 10, 9, 8, 7, NASA, we have launch. 6, 5, 4, we're about to go. 3, 2, 1. You should be able to do that right now. Put your hands up and just go. And not look sideways. When you see yogis doing this in a kirtan, they're meaning, take it all, take all the shit. I don't need toilet paper. Give me a bath in the Ganges. Give me a bath in the sound vibration. I'm done. We're done. I'm clean. Thank you.
You notice I'm not putting my hands. You'll notice I'm not putting my hands up because I'm finding it really good fun and I'm hoping to keep coming back. The ride is just too good. It's great fun.
And that is called,
I'm not bored with it yet.
That's called ultimate moksha. That's ultimate moksha. Now, here's the secret. You're about to say it, Satish. You explained it. If that's the case, how do you live like that and be a reasonable citizen of society? Please tell us.
Awesome. Okay, so
good question.
Right, imagine a swimming pool and imagine what surfers do in Hawaii. When you prepare somebody for surfing in Hawaii, you don't take them somewhere where the waves are predictable. You teach them and strengthen them so that whatever wave comes along, they can ride it. And not just ride it with their hands like this, as we were a moment ago, and surf and actually enjoy the ultimate experience of being shocked, being challenged, and actually enjoying it. You get bounced off the surf a few times and all the rest of it, but the difference is that you have prepared yourself for a journey that you do not know about, but the muscles that you've prepared yourself with are fairly good and you're okay with whatever comes. It's like stepping onto the roller coaster for the first time. You've no idea where it's going to take you, but if you let go of it, you know you're going to come out the other end unharmed, and so you can enjoy the ride more. Now, on the other hand, think about a swimming pool. Now, in a swimming pool, somebody will create that swimming pool and they will tell you to go from end to end, and it's safe. but it's only safe because you don't know how to surf. Imagine a surfer being given a swimming pool and say, hey, enjoy that for the rest of the day. There'd be a deep sense of dissatisfaction. And so the two approaches are really the East and the West approach. What we call dharma, do no harm to anybody else, preserve the environment that we're in. These are all simple principles, commandments, if you will, which when you take literally, the surprises that are presented to you become increasingly nourishing and increasingly challenging according to your muscles and how they develop. But at the end of it, you should be able to leave it with an exhilarating experience and say, thank you so much. In fact, I'd like to go around again, until you've been around a few times, and then you can say, well, actually, that's enough now. I'm ready to go home. The only way is to learn from the experiences of not harming, from being courageous. And as Jeffrey G had said, a phrase that I've come across, which I feel a little bit deceitful and I shouldn't be encouraging it, but you know what they say about fake it until you make it or something like that. So it's a very Wall Streety sort of horrible, yucky phrase. But if you practice being courageous, courage appears in your body. If you practice being impervious to harm, the situations life will present you with will be increasingly challenging, but you will be developing the capacity to be impervious to harm.
Yes.
If you practice that stillness which is at the center of your being, which in the Gita it says that which can't be cut, that which can't be wet, etc., that's the way in which your awareness starts to discard all of the things that cause suffering. There is no option. Either we do it knowingly or we're doing it unknowingly. It's being done to us because this exists for us to realize what we are. And so of the two, when you're ready and you've had enough of the swimming pool, it's time to devote a lot more attention to the way in which surfing is done in this life. And there are so many courses, teachers, books. The Gita is an amazing character building exercise. It's what equips you with the knowledge that you need to be able to challenge anything with a smile on your face. We have now in the English language an absolute abundance of material. And Jeffrey G mentioned that this is a pivotal moment, and it really is, because the way I look at the manner in which events have conspired, we have myself, who is born and steeped in the tradition, who really had no intentions of ever teaching. I learned and did my sadhana for my own personal benefit and for the benefit of my 3 sons, who were very vocal at a very young age, and I knew they would give me a hard time in adopting my tradition unless I was able to answer all their questions. So I was required to learn how to articulate what I was doing in this language. And then we have Jeffrey G, who's from completely the opposite situation, who's discarding much that he has learned and putting that understanding into the same language. And when we combine, we're like 2 diamonds who just friction between us creates a much better way of articulating these ideas in the language in which it needs to be done. And we didn't plan this. And so I'm suggesting to you that this is the way in which surfing works. If you allow yourself to be buffeted around a little bit and continue, then you will find that you'll be able to stand up. It's the manner in which it actually works. There's a story which, can I share it? It's a bit robust, and maybe it might be a bit too much for a first outing, Jeffrey. But the essence of it is I'll save that. Oh, what a wonderful way of leaving everybody tantalized and on tenterhooks.
Next Wednesday, right?
Come back for more. I will save that for a subsequent episode and leave it on a cliffhanger. But the issue,
there's a riot on the chat box now.
The point is really simple, and that is that when we experiment with what we are and with life, life participates. Right? We are guided. We are in a flow. And if we learn to swim with the flow, we will get carried to where we're supposed to be going. If we're going against the stream, then we will get bounced around on rocks and twigs and logs and everything else until we understand. And so be courageous and absolutely experiment. I will tell you all of an experiment that I did once. I decided for 1 year that I was just going to say yes to everything. And this is going back a long time ago, long before they made the movie and everything else.
Before you were married, I'm sure.
Actually, it wasn't, so I had to be really quiet.
Or
But
censor the parts we don't need to know.
it brought an unbelievable amount of valuable learning and experience and evolution to me. And I will share some more details when we next have an outing.
Wonderful.
But as Jeffrey G said, we are part of the process, and the process will support us, it will protect us. And the only thing that challenges and stands between us and being carried by the flow is this fear that we are a tiny little flesh suit, you know, and we don't want to be hurt. Sorry guys, we don't have the choice. We are going to be taught, or we will learn voluntarily. So get with the program and go with it.
And since Satish promised to be somewhat naughty next time, I'll give you just a teaser this time also. You've heard of Salome of the Seven Veils, whose almost striptease was internationally and historically famous because she had 7 veils that she wore as she danced and was the most beautiful being anyone had seen. And one at a time, she took them off. First, she took off the earth. Then she took off the water. Then she took off the fire. Then she took off the air. Then she took off the Akash. Then she took off the Manas. Then she took off the Buddhi and stood on stage, an immortal Atma for everyone to see.
Beautiful.
This process is a lovely, beautiful dance between you and the source of all, and the presence of everyone who gets more excited the more you're your true self. And whatever excitement you've had before can't come close to the ecstasy that comes from this, Brahmabhuta Prasanatma. This leads us to the ecstasy we're looking for. It's not just a mediocrity of escape from danger.
Absolutely.
The escape from danger is the entree to the ecstasy that you've always known is possible, being with you from moment to moment to moment, always. And Satish, I get so excited in your company that I just want to start dancing.
You'll be wired for the next couple hours this afternoon. I know we could probably go on for another hour, so, and I know many of you came on late. So to avoid this next Wednesday, could everyone please register early? I know this one was really short notice. jeffreyarmstrong.ca is the website. You must register. It just makes it easier. When you register very late, it's difficult for me to manage everything. I know everyone thinks I have 10 arms, but I assure you I'm struggling. The other thing I wanted to mention before we go, I wasn't going to, but I feel it's really apt now that we all have time here. I'm really proud of our students here handling all of the Sanskrit and the definitions, but I want to point out Jeffrey's book here, Spiritual Teachings of the Avatar. You're all sitting home, and instead of doing Facebook, I recommend you read it. It's got an amazing vocabulary list in the back. And so I really think, you know, to stay up and get deeper into this conversation, you need to have the definitions of some of these Sanskrit words. As both these scholars have mentioned, there is no one-to-one direct translation, and you need quite often a paragraph. And this is the book that Jeffrey's working on right now. It's the 108 Sanskrit words every yogi must know. And so we are secluded here finishing that book. And the other one, for all of your non-yogi friends, please recommend this book, Karma. It talks about the 4 kinds of karma. And we're getting a lot of questions in our practice right now from clients on, you know, what's happening? Why is this happening to me? And that book will give you some of the answers and tools to help people get through this difficult time. Do you have anything you want to say on that?
Yeah,
Jeffrey?
just one last thing, if I may, a story that brings home to you what the difference is between a life where you're cultivating yourself and the moment when you leave your body. One of the metaphors I use for that is what I experienced writing that book, because the film Avatar came out. Sandy and I saw it, And we were doing a series on the avatars of the Veda for a couple of weeks before the film came out. Didn't know the film was coming out at all. It came out, we saw it, came home, and I said, I've got to write a book explaining the real meaning of Avatar because this movie's just messed it up. So we then called my sister Amy, who had a public relations firm. She called a publishing company, Beyond Words, a subset of Simon & Schuster. The woman who was in charge of books there said, that's a very interesting idea. If you write me one chapter and
A book outline.
a book outline, I'll take it to my meeting in New York next Monday. This was on a Friday. Next Monday.
Which was the very next Monday.
Yeah, the next Monday. And I already have 8 books to pitch, but I'll pitch yours too. And I have 15 minutes when I make my pitch because it's Simon & Schuster and they're big. So she went, she pitched it. They said, yes, let's do it, but let's do a crash book. Never heard of it. A crash book is 3 months idea to publish. And so they accepted our contract. We signed a contract with them that the book would be done. This was January 24th or so, that the book would be done March 24th. Cover to cover, word for word, glossary, edited, fully ready, and then published. But you see, Sandy and I had never had a honeymoon, so we planned a trip before this idea of a book began to go to Bali for our honeymoon.
I've been saving points for years for this trip.
And this is at a time when we barely had enough money to pay our rent. So this was a big deal. The first time we'd ever go somewhere.
13 years into our...
Yeah, just to be together and just to have some time together on an exotic place. We'd both never been to Bali. So we get the contract. 1 chapter is written and go. We fly to Bali a couple of days later, and all I have is a notebook pad and a pen, and I go to cafes, and for 14 days, I write a chapter a day of that book with no references, with no books to refer to, with nothing at all to refer to. This is a pop quiz.
How well do you know this knowledge?
This is the moment of death. And every chapter in that book was written as it is. It was just polished afterwards, sitting in a cafe in Bali, a chapter a day, no room for error. That chapter went home. Sandy edits it till 3 in the morning, sends it to our editor, who then sends it to their editor, and the book is finished exactly on time. Last chapter, when we get back home, we're done. I felt like a tube of toothpaste someone just stepped on. But you see, that was possible because my every waking moment for the 40 years before that was dedicated to this knowledge, dedicated to mantras, dedicated to this learning, dedicated to being in the company of people like Satish, dedicated to being in friendship and connection and listening and learning from every Vedic teacher who had anything interesting to say, and having a hunger for this. So my beloveds, it is your hunger that is driving this. It is your hunger that you must switch over. And that book was the result of my insatiable hunger for immortal wisdom. But you must become like that in order to get the benefit of the book. So that's the spirit in which to read it. Get that hungry again. Risk everything again. Get that excited again. And don't let matter beat you down and make you dull and feel mediocre, because there's no other qualification I have than a good memory and a hunger. You have every bit of that qualification yourself. It isn't that I could do it. Isn't that amazing? It's that we can all do it. Isn't that amazing? We're all Jiva Atmas. We're all immortal beings. And so with that, I just invite you to the party. That's what my guru did. I invite you to the party. If you get so determined, you can't be suppressed, but so polite and kind and loving that you offend no one, everything that you've ever wished for will be fulfilled.
Or you learn to be offensive with a smile.
You have mastered that art,
Absolutely.
Rakesh. I have seen you take
Satish.
Satish, I've seen you take unconscious people to task ever so nicely.
May I conclude with a mantra?
Before you do that, can I just make a commercial?
Of course.
And I'd like to end on the mantra so that we all can feel that
Please.
deeply in our heart. Thank you, everybody, for being with us this time. I think the conversations, there were a few questions, but I think the boys answered it so nicely. Next Wednesday, we are very excited to have another dear friend of Jeffrey's on with us, and that's Richard Raisler. And Richard is the founder of TrueHueNews.com. You can have a look at that. It's a curated news channel, and Richard is one of the most global citizens that we know. When we first met 5 years ago, we played a game with him that name a place on the planet that he hadn't been, and I can assure you there wasn't any. Maybe there is now, but it's so remote that probably no one else has been there either. He's an adventurer, and he's also a board member of the World Affairs Council, and behind the scenes a counselor for many government officials.
Philosopher, architect.
Yeah, brilliant. He's an architect by profession.
Brilliant art curator, and travels the world studying the arts and culture of all the countries in the world. So he's and he's what you would call a philosopher after many lifetimes in his final days. Not Vedic in orientation, but we in the Vedic don't ask that question. We say, tell me what you know. We're not sectarian. We say, tell me what you know. Can't wait to learn. And from Richard, you will indeed, as you did with Satish, from a different angle. Satish and I are Vedic brothers, blood brothers, but Richard
from
and
from the same mother with a capital M.
From the same mother Veda. Absolutely. So Richard is like that, but he's the out-of-school philosopher who's walked the planet looking for the truth. And I'm sure you'll find it very refreshing and delightful.
And Satish, I hope you'll come back on next Wednesday. Just we can call upon you. I know you have a busy schedule, but I think all of our schedules have somewhat cleared. So we'd be very honored if you would come back on as well.
I will be delighted to lurk in the background somewhere, as Richard has.
Yes, he has lurked on this. I'm not going to tell you where he's lurked, but he has lurked here.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will do my best to.
Thank you, everybody. Namaste. Satish, would you please close?
Ji. So this mantra is normally the mantra that I use to conclude a yoga class. In our normal life, we experience separation. Being not a part of everything is quite commonplace for us. In a yoga class, we try and experience union by leaving our individuality outside of the door. And this mantra I've always found at the end is just a reminder for people to take when they leave and venture back into the outside world, that what is here is complete. The word Purna means complete. And what is not here is also complete. And when you have something which is quite so complete, taking completion outside of a bigger completion still leaves both of them complete. It's just a perception issue. And so this mantra is merely a statement that although we're experiencing individuality and separateness, that's just a misunderstanding on our part. We are perfect, we are complete, and we are part of something which is perfect and complete with our participation in it. So if you'd like to just close your eyes for a moment. Om Purnamada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Dachyate Purnasya Purnam Adhaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.
Hari
Om Tat Sat.
Om Sat Tat.
The invocatory verse of the Isa Upanishad, ladies and gentlemen.
Indeed.
Beautifully chanted by Satish Sharma. Satish, we have been so honored by having your presence that we must do this again and again and again.
Oh, thank you so much. Sorry, shameless to the end.
Yes.
But it's been a pleasure, and thank you everybody else for allowing your minds to be open for a complete stranger to lob and rummage around in all of your understandings without any unpleasantness at all. I'm really indebted, and please go out there and let's make this change happen. It's waiting for us.
Jai, jai,
Jai.
Oh.
And to everyone else, the persons listening are a sacred and amazing experience for the speaker. It is as if we don't exist in our fullness without your amazing attention and hunger. And we find the fulfillment that is sometimes missing, because it can be lonely to be a sadhu and go through the world seldom finding people of a like mind. To be with a group like yourselves, so hungry, so beautiful, so intent, so intelligent, so wise already, and to be able to hold this gathering with you is our dream. Not to have people join anything, but to bring people together like you who've already purposely not joined anything. Like Groucho Marx said, I wouldn't want to join any club that would have me. We don't want you to join something. We want you to be what the most you can be, and then we're so honored to be in your presence when you are. So just know that that's how we who teach look at you who are temporarily listening, that believe me, your inspiration in our lives is such an important healing substance that we are humbled by the opportunity to speak to you in this way, to go from slavery to seva, to service. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe and stay connected. Bye-bye.